So Germán, and I never know how to pronounce your last name.
Abrevaya.
Abrevaya. I just made this up. So, so he's working on deep brain stimulation. So we created essentially a model for actually ERNA, right? And he's going to tell us about it. And you have the same problem.
Hi, my name is Germán Abrevaya, and I am a staff scientist at Neuroblox. And today I will present to you some of Neuroblox capabilities for modeling deep brain stimulation. But first of all, what is DBS? It is a treatment for various neurological disorders, such as the Parkinson disease. And you can think of it as some kind of pacemaker, but for the brain. Here in this image, you can see an electrode implanted in the subthalamic nucleus. And in general, there are some beta oscillations, which you can see here in the power spectrum, that correlates with some of the Parkinson disease symptoms. And that's why it is usually used as a standard biomarker to guide surgery, to guide the positioning of the electrode, and also to guide the DBS programming afterwards. But it has some practical limitations. For example, it doesn't correlate with all of the Parkinson disease symptoms, such as the tremor. It doesn't correlate with tremor. Also, it is susceptible to the microlesion effect, which is a temporary improvement on the symptoms, but only due to the lesion done during surgery. And also, it is unreliable during general anesthesia. But in the past few years, there were some new biomarkers that were identified, which could potentially complement beta oscillations. And these are some spontaneous high-frequency oscillations that you can see here in the power spectrum, and some evoked resonant neural activity, or ERNA in short, which are the focus of this talk. So ERNA are some transient oscillations that emerge about 4 to 5 milliseconds after each pulse. Their amplitude builds progressively with the train of pulses, and then decay after the end of the stimulus around 30 milliseconds after the end of the stimulus. They have some remarkably high signal-to-noise ratio, and most importantly, oftentimes the positioning of the electrode that generates the maximum ERNA amplitude coincides with the positioning of the electrode that makes the treatment more effective. So those are called the therapeutic sweet spots. However, the actual biophysical sources of ERNA are still unknown, as it is the relation with ERNA and HFOs. But what we are most interested in is in how to use these new biomarkers in order to inform the surgery, the positioning of the electrode, and also the DBS programming in order to get the most effective treatment with the lesser side effects. So, but despite the effectiveness of DBS, it is still vastly underutilized in the world. And one of the main reasons is the complexity of the DBS programming. Currently, it is still some kind of guess and check process in which the patient has to go to visit the clinician, the neurologist, every few weeks. The neurologist change some parameters, then the patient go back home and check if the symptoms are better or worse, and then go back to the neurologist. So it is quite cumbersome. And these new biomarkers could potentially help and benefit both patients and clinicians. Patients would have greater and increased access to this treatment, also more efficacy, and a reduced number of the programming visits. Clinicians would get more robust tools to guide surgery, and also more effective and simpler tuning. But moreover, the whole scientific community would benefit by an increased understanding of the principles of action of DBS. So here at Neuroblox, we're developing a DBS module, and in particular, we're creating some minimal ERNA model, which aims to be not only biomimetic, but also computational efficient, so that you can tune the model to experimental data and create patient-specific models. So the first step for this was to create a simple DBS stimulus blocks. These are just square stimulus, in which, of course, you can tune all the basic parameters, but also the smoothness of the stimulus, and also compute the transition times, which would be useful later on to pass those time points to the solver as the t-stops and make sure that the solver doesn't miss the changes in the stimulus. But we also implemented some protocol DBS, matching the parameterization that clinicians use. For example, this is blocks of stimulus, and you can change, of course, the number of bursts per block, the number of pulses per burst, etc. And then we were developing a biophysically detailed model of what it is believed to be the dynamical core of ERNA, which is the feedback loop between GPE and STN with some cortical input to excitatory cortical input to STN, which is modeled by an Ornstein-Uhlenbeck process. And the GPE and STN neurons are modeled with the classical Hodgkin and Huxley model. So in particular, we model the DBS effect, the stimulus effect, directly in the connections that are known to be affected by the stimulus, namely the cortex to STN, STN to GPE, GPE to STN, but not the GPE collaterals. So here you have some classical conductance space synaptic current. S sub k are the synaptic gating variables. And here in this rate function is where the DBS comes into play. So this is a plot of this function, and you can see that when the neuron is not firing, so it is at its resting state, this function tends to 0. If the neuron fires, it increases its value. But also if it is not firing and you have stimulus, it also increases. And with this set of interpretable parameters, you can tune the sensitivity of the model to the stimulus, which would be to tune the response, the dose response curve. So let's see some results. Here on the left, you have some experimental ERNA measured by our collaborators at MGH, the Massachusetts General Hospital. And on the right, you have some results from our simulations. These are some average over 200 simulations. And even though the shape is not exactly the same, you can already see that this is still a work in progress. You can see that it already recovers the main features of ERNA. Like the very basics is that after each pulse, you see some evoked pulses, evoked neural activity. Also, the amplitude of the peaks starts to increase, builds up with the train of pulses. And you can see also this second peak here, which builds up progressively with the train spikes. So we learned a bit about deep brain stimulation therapy and how it can help to alleviate some of the Parkinson disease motor symptoms. We saw also the simple stimulus blocks and the protocol stimulus block. And I presented a minimal STN to GPE model that reproduces ERNA. So some next steps could be to develop an equivalent population model to make the simulations faster and more proper to be incorporated into some optimization procedure and in order to make some patient-specific models. And also, most importantly, to add the spatial dimension to the model so that this model could be used to guide the surgery and the positioning of the electrode. So ultimately, Neuroblox proved to be a simple, flexible, and performant tool for doing neuroscience research, and in particular, perfect to develop models of deep brain stimulation. Thank you very much.
Question. Nobody wants to add a question? If there are no questions, then we'll thank him again.
Thanks.